Hi all, welcome you all for yet another episode on petroleum refining. We have seen multiple aspects of petroleum refining. Today we are going to cover an important aspect with respect to safety of the maintenance operations inside a petroleum refinery. So that is we are going to cover about the work permit system. In this particular episode, we are going to discuss about what is a work permit system, why at all a work permit is needed, and what are the different types of work permit, and what jobs demand work permit, and the potential safety hazards while issuing a work permit. These things we will cover in the next 30 minutes. So, in a refinery, the safety classification is broadly under personal safety and process safety. The reason why safety is given utmost importance is most of these streams, starting with the raw material till the end products, they are flammable in nature. Starting with crude oil and products like LPG, diesel, gasoline, every product is flammable in nature, and some of them at extreme conditions they are explosive in nature. Then the operating parameters are also at a very high temperature. For example, in the crude distillation unit, the operating temperature, the maximum temperature is around 350 to 370 degrees centigrade. In a fluid catalytic cracking unit, the temperature will be more than 700 degrees centigrade. Similarly, the pressure inside a hydrocracker plant will be more than 100 atmosphere. There is always a chance for safety incident. So that's why safety is given utmost importance, and it is broadly divided into personal safety and process safety. Under personal safety, the operating personnel they are supposed to wear their personal protective equipments, which are known as PPE. For example, helmet, these gloves, goggles, boiler suit, etc. Then under process safety, rest of the other things will come into play. For example, designing of the plant, modification inside the plant, and then the work permit system, and the process control instrumentation, including the safety instrumented system like PLCs and emergency shutdown. All this will be part of process safety. But today we are going to talk about a very specific subject known as work permit system. What is a work permit? Work permit is a document giving permission for a specific work to be carried out subject to certain stated conditions within this specified period of time. For example, if the operating crew issues a work order to arrest a leak from a pipeline, the maintenance department will allocate the resources to address that particular work order. Before they take up the job to the particular unit, they are supposed to get permission from the operating crew. The operating crew will give a document saying that this particular task need to be completed within the certain specified time, and also by taking consideration into several safety aspects. This single document is known as work permit or permit to work. Safety work permit is a written document authorizing persons to carry out work, warning them of the concerned dangers and spelling out the precautions needed for carrying out the job safely. Why work permit? Industry may handle hydrocarbons and toxic materials which are posing special risk. As I said, the hydrocarbons they are flammable and explosive in nature. Not only that, in a refinery we also handle several other chemicals, catalyst. Right, some of the chemicals would be acids, and then catalyst. They have their own HSE issues. Maintenance personnel may not be adequately familiar with the process condition. The operating crew will know the plant behavior because they are in the plant, operating the plant for several years, whereas the maintenance person may not be familiar with the plant operating parameters or the plant process flow. And specifically, when you employ contract worker to perform the maintenance track, definitely they will lack insights about the plant. Operation will determine it is safe to perform the designated job, and they have to give the adequate warning to the workmen who are part of the maintenance team. Basic purpose of work permit system is to prevent injuries to personnel as well take care of the process safety. Principles behind work permit system is to protect property from damage, avoid fire, ensure that all work is carried out in the safest possible manner. Permit specify the condition and the procedure for safe execution. So safety, safety, safety. That is the whole fundamental principle behind the work permit system. So which will result into zero accidents or zero injury. And the other principles are the work permit system will spell out nature of job, equipment involved, time limitations, locations, and personnel involved. So all this will be specified in the work permit system. It is a technically measured document to prevent hazardous and accident. And what kind of jobs demand work permit? Any major or minor maintenance work, inspection activities. For example, you want to measure the thickness of a reactor, you want to measure the corrosion level inside a pipeline by putting a probe inside a pipeline. Then construction, you want to construct the foundation stone for a motor. Then any alteration inside the plant like modification of pipeline, adding or removing a wall, the process equipment cleaning of a vessel or a heat exchanger, entry into confined space like the vessel or a separator, excavation, you want to dig out the soil and work on the electrical cable, or you want to lay a new pipeline. So for that you may dig out the soil, so that the excavation. And vehicle entry into the hazardous process plant area. So all these jobs demand a work permit. And what are the jobs that don't demand a work permit? So generally the trivial jobs like routine welding, cutting, and similar maintenance fabrication jobs carried out in the central workshop. So generally the central workshop will be slightly off from the process plant, and it is a confined space. So there you don't require a permit to work to do this welding and cutting kind of job. While if the same cutting and grinding job is performed in the process plant, you may have to get a work permit. Then routine sampling for the purpose of laboratory analysis. At the designated sampling point, the operator will open the valve and collect the hydrocarbon. So which is actually a slightly risky task, but definitely the operator will know the responsibilities and he knows how to safely collect the petroleum sample. But this is a routine affair and does not require a work permit. Replacement of a control card, annunciation card, lamp, charts, and inking of charts, panel lamp, etc. inside a control room, they don't require a work permit. Watering, gardening work related to horticulture in and around the admin buildings of a refinery. Manual sweeping with or without vacuum cleaners in the plant area. Entry of stores vehicle for loading and unloading of materials, chemicals at safe place inside the plant, they don't require. So all these jobs they do not require a work permit system. And what are the types of work permits? Generally they are classified into major 7 classifications, and of course this classification may slightly vary from company to company, but traditionally globally this is the kind of types, the types of work permit system. Number one, hot work or vehicle entry permit, clearance and cold work permit. Then third one is die cutting or excavation permit. Fourth one, road cutting or black edge permit. Then vessel entry, vessel box up permit, work at height permit, radiation work permit. So each one of these tasks they are very specific, and they have their own potential safety hazards, and that is why for each of the work different kind of classifications are there in permit to work or work permit systems are there. Let us see some of them in detail. And typical features of work permit form generally consist of the following features. So long time back, couple of decades back, work permit system was paper based, and we have to create work permit using carbon copies. We may have to create triple or quadruple copies, but most of the refineries they are slowly moving into the electronic system or web based system. So traditionally it was original and the copies were there. The original is unmarked and belonging to the executing authority. So in some companies, they are in pink color and they have a serial number, and their special instructions are printed in the permit. So let's see some of the permits, try to understand their significance. To start with, let's start with hot work. Hot work is any work such as welding, cutting job, chipping by spark producing tools, etc., carried out in vicinity of flammable or combustible materials that is capable of causing fire condition. So as I said, any spark producing activity which is happening in maintenance shop floor may not require a work permit. But the same kind of jobs, if they are performed in the process unit where hydrocarbon streams are available which can catch fire, then definitely it comes under the purview of hot work. So hot work permit, the equipment of the area should be tested to determine the explosive range through the explosive meter by taking air samples. Cleaning or ventilating can clear explosive content. For example, if one of the process vessel is having a leak, and this leak has to be arrested by doing a welding job, then the operating crew has to ensure that the process vessel is completely drained out of the hydrocarbon liquid and it is water washed, opened up, all the hydrocarbon vapors are vented out with the help of a steam or inert gas, and ensure that there are no hydrocarbon vapors present by using an explosive meter. So only when they get satisfactory results, then work permit can be given. And they have to cover all pits, sumps, opening, etc., with a fireproof material to prevent spark entering in and causing explosion or fire. Area and surrounding are sufficiently wetted to facilitate extinguishments of spark, hot slug, etc. For example, if welding, cutting, or grinding has to be performed and this particular location you have lot of pipelines passing through it, then you are supposed to put a tarpaulin which is wetted with the water, so that even if a spark comes and falls on the bottom surface, so it is immediately extinguished. Adequate firefighting equipment should be kept ready along with the person who knows the operation of the equipment. Sometimes not only the portable fire extinguishers, even a fire truck will be kept nearby to take care of any eventuality. If something goes wrong and if there is a fire, immediately the fire truck can be put into action. And the validity of the hot work permit is normally for 8 hours, for example 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and beyond 5 p.m. renewal is needed after authorization from the head of department. For example, the plant supervisor or the shift manager who will be able to extend the permit beyond the typical working hours. Normally, hot jobs are not performed in the night shift, but if it is very much urgent, then the permission would be granted by the head of the department. For each location and equipment, separate hot work permit is required in process unit. For example, the maintenance crew may be performing welding activity of a process pipeline which is passing through multiple units, but they have to take permits from the designated plant because each plant has got its own risk parameters. So definitely permit is needed from different units. Then the next type of work permit is for confined space entry or vessel entry. For example, in a refinery, giant vessels are there, like a distillation column, separators, knockout drums are there. Sometimes you may have to clean up the vessel by getting into the vessel, or you may have to perform welding or cutting task inside a vessel. All this is possible only when you get inside the vessel. So, in order to get inside the vessel, you have to drain off all the hydrocarbon liquid, and as I said earlier, you have to remove all the hydrocarbon vapor by properly venting out. And this requires, because a confined space will have a limited quantum of oxygen, and if in oxygen deficient scenario, the workman may get affected. So, dedicated permit is needed for confined space. A confined space is defined as an area which may or may not be enclosed. It is large enough and a person can bodily enter and perform assigned tasks. It is not designed for continuous human occupancy. Though the crew member can enter into the vessel or a space, actually that place is not fit to be continuously been occupied. It has got limited or restricted means of entry and exit. So even the entry and exit sizes will be limited. In case of eventuality, in case of any emergency, it is not that easy to come out. So that is why it is known as confined space. It is subjected to potential hazard, namely accumulation of toxic and flammable gas, vapor, inert gas, oxygen deficient. For example, if the oxygen supply is oxygen presence is less than 20%, it is going to be a potential safety hazard. Flooding of liquid, steam, or any other hazardous substance. Some of these examples of confined spaces are oil tanks, water tanks, condensate tanks, reactors, oil water sewer pits, tanker trucks, vessels, floating roof decks, duct, etc. So, whenever our task is performed in the above scenario, we have to give a specific permit known as confined space entry permit. Before giving this permit, the operating crew need to ensure that the vessel or equipment is isolated from all sources through which any energy, stock, or harmful substance can get introduced by disconnecting, blinding, blanketing, etc. They have to drain, clear, wash the equipment vessel to make it free from toxic, flammable gases and other harmful substances. And third and important aspect is to test the vessel inside and determine the presence of explosive mixture and the deficiency of oxygen, and further ventilate the workroom till the oxygen concentration is increased more than 17%. The operating crew has to use the explosive meter and ensure the hydrocarbon is below the threshold limit and the oxygen percentage is beyond the threshold limit. In case of deficiency of oxygen, and if it cannot be improved, the entry of the explosive should be restricted. Then the third type of work permit is a permit to work in high altitude. All type of jobs that is performed above 2 meters, except those jobs where working platform with the railing and stairs are there. For example, if a task need to be performed on top of reactor where the staircase and a platform is already provided in the reactor, then there is no need to take this permit, specific permit. On the contrary, if the maintenance technician has to use a rope ladder or using a hip belt to perform the task, then definitely this specific permit need to be obtained from the operating department. Then electrical jobs, definitely they need work permits. All type of extra high tension or high tension jobs in plant, including the PCC maintenance, transformer maintenance, bus couplers maintenance. These kind of jobs, specific work permit need to be taken from the operating crew. Excavation jobs, definitely this is mandatory because in a refinery, lot of electrical cables would be under the subsoil, and sometimes certain pipelines will also be under the ground. So excavation jobs in plant more than 0.5 meter deep and cutting of the road to lay a new pipeline or to remove a leaky pipeline, this kind of permit need to be taken. And hazards in excavation or breaking pipe, likely carrying hazardous substances, breaking of electrical and telephone cables, etc. They are there. So definitely this kind of jobs need to be performed very carefully, and it is the responsibility of the operating crew to warn the maintenance crew about all kind of potential hazards. So if it is not performed properly following the standard operating procedure, their task can result into accidents, disruption and delay in production, loss of life, loss of property, disruption in communication. So these kind of permits can be prepared with the help of factory plan and sent to the engineer plant in charge for countersigning. So suppose if the operating crew is not familiar with the subsurface assets like the pipings, cables, etc., then The respective engineering department who are in possession of the drawings can also give additional authorization. The task is given in a foolproof manner. The plant in charge or engineer would suggest special precaution to avoid accident, damage, etc. before countersigning. After countersigning, permit can be used to execute or receiver. Suitable personal protective equipments are to be used. Whenever a permit is given, there are two set of people. The first set of people, they are known as issuing authority of the work permit. Issuing authority is responsible for preparation and handing over of the equipment in safe condition to perform the work. As I said earlier, the issuing authority will be the operating crew members. For example, the operating crew member of a distillation unit or a reformer unit or a boiler unit or a LPG filling plant. The authority to issue all type of work permit is generally granted to the shift supervisor level or officers and above. So the shift supervisor will be the person concerned or person in charge who will be able to issue the work permit system to the maintenance crew. The executing authority of work permit, they are not part of the operating crew. They are the people who are going to perform the task. It can be the internal maintenance team of a refinery or a third party like a contract workman. So they request for a permit and you shall indicate type of tools and equipment necessary for performing the task. For example, if the task need to be performed by using a crane or if a particular task demands specific cutting tools, then they have to explain what kind of tools they are going to use, and accordingly the specific permit will be issued by the issuing authority. And the executing authority also ensure his tools, equipment and accessories are in good condition and all his workers are provided with the proper personal protective equipment. Many times warning the executing people alone may not be sufficient. As an operating personnel, before giving the work permit, you have to ensure the preparation of the equipment is done as per the standard operating procedures. For example, if a specific task has to be performed where the system is connected with the pump and the pump is connected with the motor, then the electrical equipment need to be specifically isolated so that by accident the motor is not starting the pump and it should not create any unexpected behavior inside the plant. And the second one is inspection tested for cold and hot job. You have to ensure that all valves are closed, the hydrocarbons are drained, the hydrocarbon vapors are vented out appropriately. Not only the process parameters, we should also take care of the utilities like steam, air, and gas. All the respective utilities lines need to be isolated appropriately. And most of the time, the system will be under pressure. They have to be depressurized and vented out. The liquids need to be drained, the positively isolated and blinded. What does it mean? The system, for example, in a vessel, there will be lot of input lines, so there will be output lines. And for input lines as well as output lines, so there will be isolation walls. So generally, people tend to think that by closing the walls, then we try to isolate the flow of the stream inside the vessel, but in reality that need not be true. So it is not just enough if you close the wall, you have to insert a metallic disc between the flanges, which is known as a blind. So this is known as positive isolation. By inserting the blind, you are positively isolating any hydrocarbon or utilities like steam, air, gas are entering into the system. So only by after positive isolation, you will be able to hand over the equipment for the maintenance. And sometimes you may have to steam it and you have to water flush it so that all the hydrocarbon vapors are completely evacuated and ventilated and gas sprayed so that enough oxygen is available in case someone has to get into the system or perform any hard task. Sometimes we may have to employ a net gas system so that the particular task can be performed in a safe manner. So while performing such kind of task, whether it is a hot work, cold work, or a job involving high altitude or confined space entry, there are a lot of potential hazards, and both the operating crew as well as the maintenance crew, they need to be clearly aware of the potential hazards. By issuing a work permit does not mean that there are no potential hazards available. Despite issuing the work permit, one has to be aware of these potential hazards. What are the lack of oxygen, carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide, or any other toxic gas presenting in the system, combustible gases, corrosive chemicals, steam or condensate into the system, high humidity, etc. So only when the operating crew members or maintenance crew members, they are cognizant of the potential hazards, then only they will be able to be safety conscious and perform the task by following the safe operating procedure. There are several protection mechanisms available: protective clothing, hearing protection, safety harness, eye protection. So, these are all part of your personal protective equipments. So, whenever a task is performed, the crew members need to take care of the personal protective equipments. So, on the other side, when a hot work is performed, you have to cover the system with the fire retardant tarpaulin, and you have to ensure that manways are open so that the air is entering in a free manner, or in case of emergency the operating crew can come out easily out of the system, and allow minimum possible number of persons inside a confined space. So just because the oxygen level is adequate or the hydrocarbon level is minimal in a confined space, you cannot allow a big crew inside. So you have to allow based on the safety tolerance, and ensure all adequate ventilations all are taken care. And whenever certain tasks are performed, the work permit system need to be adequately displayed so that all the workmen, they are all aware of the work permit, because work permit displays lot of conditions to be taken care while performing the task. Then electrical isolation. Before issuing a work permit, it is essential to ensure that the equipment or facility to be worked out is electrically safe and electrical power is isolated to the extent necessary for the safe conduct of the authorized work. Issuing and executing authorities and electrical maintenance shall jointly decide the extent of isolation required. For example, sometimes you may have to remove the circuit breaker, or you may have to remove the fuse from the system, and you have to put some tags like do not operate tag shall be used when isolation by local switch is decided by the adequate protection. Then there is a separate system known as logout and tagout system. They need to be followed while following the electrical maintenance activities. And at the end of the job, the permit need to be surrendered. When the job is completed, the work permit should be surrendered in all the 3 copies. Process in charge after inspecting and assuring that the job is over with will acknowledge that the permit in 3 copies. This is to ensure that the same permit is not used for another task. So it has to be logically closed, and the permit has to be taken back by the operating crew members. So this is how we are trying to ensure safety in a refinery by the work permit system. And today in this episode, we try to understand what is a work permit, why at all a work permit is needed, what are the different kinds of work permit, and what jobs demand work permit, and the potential safety involved inside a plant while performing the maintenance task. So with that, we conclude today's session. Let's catch up with another episode on petroleum refining. Until then, let me sign off, and looking forward to see you. Bye. Thank you so much.